Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. And Daniel, good to see you.
Hello, Dr. Paul.
Good. Another announcement dealing with foreign policy. Another candidate for National Security Advisor, General McMaster. And there's a lot of excitement about that. He's getting good reviews from some sources and not so good reviews from some others. But, you know, I want to start off with some good news about this whole thing, because we will be doing a little bit of challenging on McMaster's record and what he believes in. The good news is it wasn't Bolton.
Yeah.
We don't have to deal with that. But the bad news is that they have another spot for Bolton.
Yeah.
So what kind of a spot? And who knows what that'll be. But it looks like he's a powerful figure. He has a lot of influence. He's solid with the neocons, and here we are, having another person appointed. But in some ways, it bothers me a little bit more than Flynn. Not that Flynn was such a giant for libertarian, but at least he wasn't like ready to start the next war with Russia. Now, McMaster's is not exactly the same way, and he doesn't believe in pussyfooting around.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to just tinker around with Russia. If there's a need for a war, that has to be, lots of troops and lots of fighting and lots of victories. So how do you see McMaster's? Can you find some good things to say, or do you want to caution our audience a little bit about some of his beliefs?
Well, it's interesting because people have really split on McMaster, and we have people like Pat Lang, who we both admire, a military man who admires McMaster very much. And you have the neocons also admire him very much. We'll look at some of that later. But, I think what's best to understand is the position rather than the man. He's a real challenger of the whole Rumsfeld doctrine, this idea, the revolution in military affairs, which is very technology heavy, that sort of thing. And he has a different view. However, in his capacity as National Security Advisor, he's dealing with policy, not winning wars. That's the Secretary of Defense. And so what he brings to the table is maybe not what Trump needs for the job.
Yes, but he can't not be involved, in the military. There's no doubt about it. But you're right; they should be separate. He should be an advisor on policy. But then it raises the question: since he has not identified publicly in any way with Trump's policy against Russia, that might be the most significant thing going on here in this whole process of picking the right people in the National Security Council and all the advisors and all the generals involved, because it's not like dealing with Saddam Hussein. That was serious and was bad and is still going on, and it reflects a bad policy. But when you start messing around with Russia and not necessarily have the moral justification to keep our troops on the borders of Russia, this could be very, very serious. And if something breaks, and there's always the accidents, the unintended consequences, the false flags, and then there's arguments. There was an argument really over exactly what was going on in Georgia. And McMaster's had an opinion about Georgia, which doesn't meet up with some of the facts that have been presented to us.
Yeah, that's indeed the case. And, there are people that we know that voted for Trump. They said, I don't like Trump. I've got a lot of problems with him. However, for me, the most important thing in the world is to stay out of World War III with Russia. So he's good on Russia. He says we should get along. I'm going to hold my nose and vote for him. Well, they may be disappointed by, as you say, by some of McMaster's views. And, they say the personnel is the policy, and Trump is not a policy wonk by any stretch of the imagination. So I think we can look at someone like McMaster as having an enormous amount of influence on what policies the president ultimately pursues. So when you look at what McMaster thinks, there was a CSIS conference where he spoke and gave a talk about Russia. It was a wide-ranging talk. But a couple of the things that struck me, and I wrote for the Institute about it yesterday, is some of the things that he said that were patently false. And one of them being, he said that Russia invaded Georgia in 2008. And that's not true. He's a smart man. He has a PhD. He's written books. And I don't question his intelligence. So is he ill-informed, or is he purposely trying to be deceitful? Even the European Union, which is by no means pro-Russia, when they looked at the 2008 war, they determined that Georgia started it by starting to fire missiles into South Ossetia, where Russian peacekeepers were stationed, and Russia responded to Georgia's provocation. That's simply settled wisdom, except maybe in the mind of McCain or someone like that. So why was he saying that? Why did he say, he's also said that Russia invaded Ukraine? That's pretty serious, but there's been no evidence of an invasion. We see from Syria how Russia acts when it acts militarily, which is, you can't hide what they did. A lot of force. So where was the invasion of Ukraine?
Well, I wonder if what you just told us could qualify as fake news, because they're really not telling the truth about it. And like you say, he's an intelligent guy. Why is he arguing this case? But the other thing that a lot of people, including us, but a lot of our viewers would recognize that how are the neoconservatives going to respond? Are they going to be lukewarm? Are they going to be opposed? Or are they going to really like him? I would say the initial response is the neocons, the people who really identify, these are the neocon leaders. They really like this guy. When you think of McCain and Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton, young guy, but he has a lot of influence already. And then, of course, Max Boot has been around for a long time. Bill Kristol's been around for a long time. So there's a lot of support. And that raises so many questions in my mind about, well, how does Trump handle this? Is he part of them, or is he going to convert them, or just what will happen? But the support from the neocons was pretty strong.
Well, I have some news for you. I have some graphics for you, as a matter of fact, just because I know you like looking at John McCain and Bill Kristol. We have a couple of tweets that I noticed this morning. Here's Bill Kristol. I can say this honestly and non-snarkily. I can't imagine anyone better prepared for the challenges of being Trump's national security advisor than H.R. McMaster. That's a pretty ringing endorsement. And then we have the second one, the senator himself. Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster is an outstanding choice for national security advisor, man of genuine intellect, character, and ability. So that's a couple thumbs up.
Yeah. Well, that should tell us a whole lot. But let's go over a little bit more on this idea of how he disagreed, the book that he wrote about Vietnam. He disagreed with that, and he disagreed with Rumsfeld's approach, because Rumsfeld had this new approach, which in a way sounded attractive, less troops, smaller army, target this, get the war over and all this. But, and this is one place where McMaster's analysis, might be right. He's saying, no, if you're going to fight a war, you don't do it that way. You got to use troops on the ground. They have to be American troops, and you have to have a lot of them. Is that about the way you understand it, or have I overstated that?
No, I think that's roughly it, but he also talks about, remember, he was one of the pioneers of the counterinsurgency doctrine of David Petraeus. And here's another little tidbit. He was passed over twice for his third star to become a general. And I think it's 3 strikes and you're out. Petraeus plucked him out and pulled him in and gave him the promotion to become a general. And so he was an early proponent of the counterinsurgency doctrine, which at the time was all the rage. Coin saved our bacon in Iraq. Well, that wasn't exactly true. And now it's been pretty much discredited, the idea of the counterinsurgency doctrine, where you go, and remember the awakening, the Anbar awakening, where you go in and you pay these guys to stop shooting at us. The problem is when you stop paying, they start shooting again. So what it really lends itself to is a perpetual occupation. And I think that is what McMaster is all about.
Right. And, and McMaster's has, a precise approach to how he looks at Islam and the religion. And it sounds reasonable. He said that he does not believe that Islam is automatically a radical religion that teaches that you have to go out and kill a lot of people, and that he did not want to say ISIS, the real radicals who do want to kill people, it is not part of what the people believe in Islam. And this would be, not a tough thing to say, but it does have some significance because, I happen to believe that is the case, but I have a different reason why there is ISIS out there. So the question is why do we have ISIS if they're not radicals? I mean, why are they? Does he agree with us that maybe it's our foreign policy that contributes it? I sort of doubt that he's sort of one of these get the troops out of there because of blowback. So it's sort of an unknown exactly how you can be so adamant and positive that we have to go full force. This is one area where he would agree with Trump probably on, that you go after ISIS full force.
Yeah, but I wonder what is his philosophy. That's a good point, Why do they hate us? What would he answer? Okay, definitely not blowback because he wants to keep troops in. So if troops being on their territory were the Robert Pape thesis, which is pretty proven, if that's what causes them to hate us, then he certainly doesn't believe that because he wants to keep troops there. Not the religion as such, even though some people in Trump's national security staff think it is just the religion. It's Islam is the problem. Okay, he doesn't believe that. Do they hate us for our freedom? I don't know. I've not heard him say that. So it'd be interesting to know why he thinks. He's in a policy position. He should have a position on it.
For some reason, I would predict that he probably wouldn't make the case that Bush always made. Oh, they come here because they hate our freedoms and our prosperity. I think that was the weakest argument. Yeah. And yet, a lot of people are still saying that. They have a hateful religion, and we're free and prosperous, and that's why we have this clash of civilizations. That is so naive and so narrow. And I've always said, if that attitude doesn't change, this thing is going to go on for a long time. And I think it's the McCain-type people who have said, this is a long battle. This is not, we don't say, do what we say and it's going to be over in 6 months. I think they admit, or maybe that's what their goal is, to keep the agitation going. It's almost like if they don't have an enemy out there, let's create them. We go about the world searching for monsters to destroy. And, even when Adam said that, they didn't even I doubt if they had what we call the military-industrial complex. Today they have the military-industrial complex that sort of likes this kind of thing. But it's dangerous stuff because too often things don't work out the same way they were. As many mistakes as have been made in Vietnam and in the Middle East, I don't think even the bad guys who aggravate and want to start these wars, I don't think they're going to be this bad. But it seems like they never learn any lesson. They say, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this kind of stuff. Maybe we aren't a very good policeman. Maybe we ought to let local people settle their disputes. Maybe the Ukraine could have figured out a way to get along with Europe and Russia. They never say the Ukrainians might have been able to figure that. We always say, well, NATO has to do it, and Russia this, and then they have to have, a little bit of skirmish, move in the troops, buy more tanks, let's get ready, because the Russians are coming, and they're the invaders. I mean, it's so much out of control. It's hard for me to comprehend this. And of course, our opponents will say, you're so naive because you don't want a strong defense and you don't care and this sort of thing. Well, I would like to think that those of us who preach the message of non-intervention and peace and prosperity and fighting only constitutional wars, I would think that we're thinking very strongly about our national defense and very strongly about our troops and very strongly about our economy. But that's not what is being recognized. So that means that we will continue to have a challenge because we still haven't figured out how this is all going to pan out, what's going on in national security levels.
Yeah, and thinking about someone like Bolton, who, as you said earlier, was promised some position somewhere, it just goes to show you can be wrong about every single thing in foreign affairs and still be considered an expert. Can you imagine as a doctor? I saw in the news the other day that a neurologist who had botched a bunch of surgeries was given a life sentence in jail. That probably should be the punishment for a foreign affairs specialist who gets everything wrong too. But going back to McMaster, and it was the same CSIS talk that I would encourage people to have a look at, I think he gave a little bit of a reveal about how he views the world. And he said, starting in 2008, I'm paraphrasing, but starting in 2008, when the U.S. began to withdraw its military from the world, that's when Russian aggression started more. They sensed that we were withdrawing, so they became more aggressive and took over that space. And I think that says a lot, because that's essentially the Max Boot philosophy, the neocon philosophy.
You can't leave.
Yeah, if we dare pull out anywhere, our adversaries will come in and take over.
I think they have good points, especially in the Middle East. That's generally what happened. We create chaos, destroy a government, somebody else moves in, ISIS develops, and who knows all that's going on. Then the Iranians get involved, and the Saudis and the Russians, it keeps going. But that's not automatically so every place, because when we finally had to admit total failure in Vietnam, they did what I had advised that we continue to do. Just get home, get out of the way. But did the Chinese army march right in? Did the Russians march right in? Guess who marched in and took over the government? The Vietnamese. They said, yeah, but they were communists. Mm-hmm. But they're lousy communists right now. I mean, they have a bit of capitalistic instincts, and they do a little bit of trading and a little bit of buying and selling, and we do business over there. So, yes, they create vacuums, but maybe under certain circumstances, it would be very good for the local people to assume responsibility for themselves. And I think that would be more the case, but the way it is in the Middle East, it wasn't like we really left, and therefore we were always a target, and we could always incite people, and people, especially in the Middle East, they have long memories, and they kept coming back.
That's like you say, people say, well, we messed it up, we went in there and messed it up, but what do we do now? You can't just go home.
That's right. There's one other item I want to touch on before we go, and that has to do with the deep state. We talked about the deep state for a long time, but now it's a cliche. You hear it all the time, and people are starting to sort it out. And the deep state, of course, to me, are the people who behind the scenes run America. The financial people, the military people, the media people, the educational system. And philosophically, they seem to get along together, and they all put the one effort on to control Congress and always end up with the same policies. And that's why I've always argued, Republicans or Democrats, it doesn't matter. The deep state is all that counts. A lot, including myself, was hopeful there would be a change, especially, with Trump having a different attitude about Russia, that the deep state, would be more exposed. It seems like they're participating maybe even more. So I don't know. I haven't come down with a final conclusion on Trump, on whether he's just part of it or he's being coerced. Because if it is true that the neoconservatives and military-industrial complex, all these groups I mentioned, if they're not part of running America, why are the people getting appointed so close to them? And the foreign policy doesn't change. Of course, always hope that Trump's going to be strong against the Federal Reserve and had an audit and all, but right now I don't think that's high on their agenda. I think the main thing they're looking to in the financial section is when the downturn occurs, what's the Fed going to do to keep the economy going? So this whole thing about where Trump is on the deep state and where the deep state is on how much control they have, or is it a unified organization?
Well, I think, our friend Mike Lofgren, who really popularized the term deep state in a couple of books that he wrote since he left the congressional staff, what he would say, and I think you'd agree with this, is Trump is part of the deep state. He's part of a segment of the deep state, which is at war with another segment of the deep state. It sounds very esoteric and maybe even conspiratorial, but Mike points out that this is an open conspiracy. This is not some secret group. They're out in the open, and you know who they are. But he would say these are two factions that are at war with each other.
And I think that's evident when you look at the arguments between the CIA and the intelligence agency and, who's on whose side. And if Trump's the president, isn't he in charge now? But it looks like getting in charge of a monster like that, is so pervasive and it's so worldwide that and I've always assumed there were factions, rogue elements of the CIA, because I think the evidence is rather clear. The CIA was involved in many, many bad things, and in particular the assassination of Kennedy. But it wasn't an official policy of the CIA that's written in the books and into the record. It was this element over there, and even some former members of the CIA were probably involved. But so it isn't a neat little package. And I think that this we'll find out more about this as time goes on, about exactly what these appointment means, how powerful the neoconservatives will be. Right now, they're winning a whole lot, and the biggest concern I have, of course, is the fact that this might weaken Trump's position, that we ought to at least be talking to the Russians. And yet, at the same time, I'm concerned about the policy being quite different when it comes to the Chinese, by us moving our Navy around there, show that we're tough, and if you mess with us, don't you remember we have a lot of nuclear weapons? So we have a ways to go, and this is a serious thing, because there are too much likelihood of accidents happen and false flags and stir up trouble, and these wars and these efforts expand much more quickly than our government can even control. But I think it's much nicer to not try to have to sort out all this stuff on an interventionist foreign policy, because once you have intervention, whether it's in the economy or in foreign policy, you can have many, many varieties of intervention, many opinions. Help this state, not this one. Help this company, do this. So it's not very easy. The only way you can probably ease back into something philosophic is, should we be doing it at all? Should we be the policemen of the world? Should we have troops in 120 countries? Should be so much involved? That's really the question, and that is why we argue the case that non-intervention is the best way to go. That's what the founders believed in. That's what the Constitution gives us, and there is no authority for all these wars to be fought, without the Congress being very much involved, instead of just capitulating. Okay, we're not going to make a decision about declaring war and why you're doing this or that, but we'll send you the money, but we want our hands clean. We didn't make these decisions, so it's all your fault if it blows up in your face. So this is what we're looking for, and that we work hard on this station, our program here, is to argue the case for a non-interventionist foreign policy, and one that would provide national security for us and make some sense. And the best way that we could go about protecting peace and prosperity for all Americans and set a standard for the rest of the world. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.